In 47 seconds, Jasmine Crockett shattered the illusion of a perfect political marriage by reading 6 lines from a letter Melania Trump never meant the world to hear. Before 21 million Americans, she exposed an $850,000 cover-up and the name of a woman erased from the White House without a trace. Trump didn't speak. He couldn't. What did Melania write that made a former president flinch on live national television? The hearing room didn't feel like justice. It felt like a trap. Lights blazed overhead, not warm courtroom lights, but interrogation beams, white and sterile, as if truth itself was on trial. The walls didn't echo. They held their breath. Every seat was taken. Senators shuffled papers they wouldn't read. Lawyers murmured into phones they didn't need. And at the center of it all sat Donald Trump, stiff as marble, eyes darting, but mouth still. Then came the click. Heels measured, deliberate cut across the stone floor like a clock ticking toward detonation. Jasmine Crockett had arrived. She didn't glance at the cameras. She didn't wave or nod. She walked straight through the silence like it owed her a debt and stopped exactly where the lights hit hardest. One hand gripped a black envelope so tightly her knuckles flashed white. No label, no warning, just wait. Trump's lawyers leaned in. Someone whispered, "What the hell is that?" But no one answered, because deep down they all knew it wasn't just paper. Jasmine didn't sit. She didn't speak. She placed the envelope on the table like a weapon wrapped in velvet. Then slowly, almost cruelly, she slid it forward until it rested perfectly in front of Trump. His fingers twitched just once. The envelope didn't move, but the room did. Something shifted, like gravity had changed direction. And everyone, every senator, every aide, every viewer at home suddenly leaned in, not toward the cameras, not toward the law, toward whatever secret was sealed in that envelope, and the woman who dared to bring it here. For a moment, no one spoke. Not the chairman, not the aides. CNN's camera zoomed in on Jasmine's face, still unflinching and calm as a storm waiting to land. The zoom wasn't just visual, it was surgical. Every wrinkle, every breath became part of the testimony. The black envelope sat between them like a loaded chamber, and still Jasmine didn't say a word. She just looked at him, steady, unreadable, unshaken. Trump shifted in his seat, lips pressed tight, then glanced sideways as if searching for someone who wasn't there. A reporter's voice slipped through the static of silence, barely above a whisper, but sharp as glass. "Where's Melania?" No one answered, because the answer was obvious and terrifying. Jasmine finally spoke. Not loud, not fast, just surgical. "Mr. Trump, according to this financial disclosure submitted October 2020, your spouse's signature is missing." She tapped the page in front of her. "This document confirms joint ownership of overseas assets, but her name is absent." Why Trump let out a soft scoff, more habit than humor. "She's resting. I speak for the family." His voice tried to sound casual, but it cracked at the edge like a window under pressure. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't nod. She just stared. Something in her silence struck harder than any cross-examination. Her eyes said it for her. "Not today, Mr. Trump." Because everyone could feel it now that this wasn't just about paperwork. This wasn't just about assets. This was about someone who had vanished from the spotlight, and the one woman whose absence was starting to speak louder than any words he could say. The chairman finally called her name, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She stood slowly, calmly, like someone already knew how this would end. The room braced itself, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't have to. Her silence was louder than Trump's entire legal team. She picked up the envelope with 2 fingers and stepped forward, each footfall echoing like a countdown no one could stop. She didn't look at Trump. She looked through him. Then, with a precision that felt rehearsed, she placed the black envelope dead center on the table between them. Not tossed, not shoved, placed like evidence, like warning, like prophecy. "This," she said, her voice cool and steady as her voice. "The one you silenced." Trump shifted. Just a flicker, eyebrows tensed. Breath caught halfway. He tried to smirk, but it never reached his eyes. Behind him, an aide scribbled something and passed a note down the line, but no one dared speak. Jasmine held the moment in both hands like a blade. "What's written in this letter," she continued, "will either clear your name or bury it beneath every lie you've ever told in front of a camera. She let that hang in the air, sharp, weighty, irreversible. And still she didn't open it. Not yet. Because sometimes the loudest truths are the ones we fear to hear. What truth was so dangerous? Even Melania was afraid to speak it out loud. Jasmine didn't open the envelope, not yet. Instead, she reached into her folder and pulled out a different document, thinner, but no less lethal. It was the 2020 financial disclosure form, bland on the surface but radioactive beneath. She held it up like a mirror. Mr. Trump, this document was filed with your administration's ethics office 2 weeks before the election. But something's missing, isn't it? She turned it toward the cameras, letting America see for themselves. At the bottom, beneath rows of digits in overseas accounts, was a blank line where Melania Trump's signature should have been. Your wife did not sign this, Jasmine said, her tone like a scalpel, and yet your office certified it as complete. Why? Trump leaned forward, posture stiff. It's a gift. I take care of my family. That's what men do. His voice was rehearsed, deflective, like a man trying to charm his way out of a locked room. But the charm didn't land. Not this time. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, or by their silence. The room tensed. Someone coughed. A camera lens clicked like a trigger. She pointed to one line buried halfway down the form, $850,000 wired to a private bank in Slovenia. She didn't want her name on it, Jasmine said coldly, because she knew exactly what it was for. And so do you. And suddenly the envelope on the table didn't feel like a mystery anymore. It felt like confirmation. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She simply changed the temperature in the room. Mr. Trump, she said, flipping to the next page like turning a blade. Can you tell the committee who Ana Lutz is? The name landed like thunder behind glass. No sound at first, just the ripple. Trump blinked. His mouth twitched, but no words came. One of his lawyers shifted in his seat, suddenly alert. She continued without mercy. According to internal staff logs, Miss Lutz was assigned to your private schedule in 2018 and 2019. She traveled with you to Zurich to Mar-a-Lago to Riyadh, yet she was never listed on any public itinerary. Jasmine let the silence bite before adding, she was removed from staff records in December 2019. No explanation, no transfer. Just gone. Trump leaned back, arms folded tight. I don't keep track of every assistant. His tone was flat, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted to the envelope, then away again. The cameras caught it. A flicker. A man who just remembered something he'd paid to forget. Jasmine's voice dropped to a whisper colder than any gavel. She didn't just disappear, Mr. Trump. She was erased. And suddenly the $850,000 wire transfer didn't feel like a red flag. It felt like hush money with a flight number. She didn't rush. Jasmine reached for the envelope like it held fire because, in some way, it did. Her fingers slid beneath the flap, slow and deliberate, and as she unfolded the letter, the room seemed to lean in. No one breathed. Not Trump, not the cameras, not even the marble walls that had seen 100 scandals before this one. But none like this. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. That made it worse. Donald, she read, I stayed quiet for Baron, but I never forgave what you did in Zurich. You said it was a meeting. You made me wait in the presidential suite for 7 hours. I remember the white orchids by the bed. I remember the window overlooking the lake. But what I remember most was the silence when you came back. No apology, just perfume I didn't wear, and a receipt for a watch I never saw again. One sentence, just one, and the air collapsed. You could hear a cufflink shift, a reporter gasp. Somewhere in the back, a pen dropped and echoed like thunder. Jasmine didn't pause. You didn't cheat on a wife, she continued, her eyes locked on Trump. You betrayed a woman who gave up her country for your crown. You bought silence with diamond cuffs, but guilt. Donald, guilt doesn't wear Prada. The letter wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Every line was a scalpel. Trump stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, but his eyes, those betrayed him. And for the first time, America saw it. Not the showman, not the bully. Just a man cornered by a truth he couldn't spin. Why would a first lady write a letter she never meant to send unless she feared it might one day be erased? Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't raise her chin or twist the knife. She simply moved to the next file like someone flipping pages in a book that had already damned its main character. Her name, she said evenly, is no longer Anna Lutz. She now lives in Zurich under sealed records and a fabricated identity. A ripple tore through the chamber, quiet but vicious. Trump shifted. His lawyer leaned forward. The sound guy in the back fumbled with his headphones. Jasmine tapped the mic twice, then hit play. The audio was scratchy at first, just static, then a woman's voice fragile but unfiltered. I signed the NDA. I took the money, but I still can't sleep. Gas spilled through the room. The woman sounded broken, not angry, not vengeful, just haunted. He said no one would find me if I kept quiet, that it'd be over, but it never was. Trump's fingers twitched on the table, tightening like they were gripping something invisible and slipping. Jasmine paused the tape. She didn't run, she said softly. She was erased, piece by piece, until the only thing left was a contract and the nightmares. Cameras zoomed on Trump's face, now pale under the lights. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even shame. It was fear, the kind that only shows up when ghosts start talking. And this one, she was just getting started. Jasmine didn't let the room recover. She reached for the next page. No build-up, no commentary, just a single invoice printed in coal black ink. This, she said, lifting it into the camera's gaze, is a payment made from the Trump Organization on July 12, 2020, listed as legal retainer, personal protection services. Amount $850,000. She let the number hang in the air, heavy as a hammer. That's not legal counsel. That's a muzzle. The silence cracked as she pulled up a second page, an internal email chain. The screen behind her lit up as she read aloud. From Jason Meyer's private counsel to Lori Wexler, Trump's senior PR lead. Her voice sharpened. Subject line, Anna. The message reads, handle Anna quietly. No scandals before the debate. Gasps scattered like broken glass. One senator dropped their pen. Another muttered, Jesus. Trump didn't flinch this time, he froze. Still, blank. As if not moving could make it go away. Jasmine's eyes never left him. You didn't just pay for silence, Mr. Trump. You budgeted it, line by line, and America picked up the tab. She held up the email, and the words glowed on screen like a confession. Because $850,000 doesn't whisper, it roars when you try to bury a witness and leave the truth bleeding behind her. The page was still glowing on the screen when Trump snapped. His fist slammed against the table with a hollow crack that startled even the marble. This is personal, he barked, his voice ragged, rising above the hum of cameras and gasps. This is fake. You people are playing dirty. This is a hit job. His face flushed, crimson veins tensing along his neck. It wasn't just anger. It was panic pretending to be power. The chairman's gavel struck once, sharp and commanding. Mr. Trump, you will compose yourself. This is not a campaign rally. The room stilled, but the shift had already happened. The facade was broken. The man who once bent rooms with his presence now looked cornered. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't rebut. She didn't need to. With deliberate calm, she reached into her file and raised the letter again, creased, handwritten, irrefutable. She held it high enough for every camera to see, every voter to remember. Her voice was low, but it cut like glass. She didn't lie, Jasmine said. She just didn't scream like you. Trump stared at the letter like it was radioactive. His lips moved, but no sound came. Across the chamber, aides whispered behind folders. One senator folded their arms, eyes wet. The truth wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. What if every silence in politics is just a scream waiting to be heard? Jasmine let the silence settle, then shattered it with a single swipe. She pulled up a classified travel log, stamped and redacted, the kind that didn't see daylight without a subpoena. This is a restricted movement schedule, she said, turning to the screen. Secret Service, Geneva, June 8, 2019. Time of departure, 2:07 a.m. No scheduled diplomatic meetings, no public events, no recorded purpose. The timestamp glowed like a flare in a snowstorm. Trump's eyes narrowed, but his jaw tensed, too slow to stop what came next. Jasmine stepped aside as the next slide lit up a blurry black and white still from a hotel hallway camera. Two figures, one unmistakably taller, broader, and in a suit. The other smaller hair pulled back, walking close beside him. No faces, but posture doesn't lie. She turned back to the committee. A former agent whose identity we're protecting confirmed under oath he wasn't alone, and we were told not to log the entry. The words echoed longer than they should have, not because they were new, but because they had always been just out of reach. Trump leaned forward slightly, blinking hard. Then, under his breath but caught by the mic, he muttered, "Is this even real?" A low murmur swelled through the gallery. Trump said nothing. His hands clasped tighter, knuckles whitening like he was holding on to the last strand of a truth that was already unraveling. This wasn't rumor anymore. This was record, and secrets that live on paper never stay dead for long. Jasmine didn't speak this time. She reached for a small remote and pressed play. The chamber filled with the sound of static, then a voice, soft, unmistakable, and chilling in its restraint. It wasn't a witness. It wasn't a whistleblower. It was Melania. Not the silent figure behind dark glasses in tailored dresses, but the woman behind the performance. Her voice wasn't shaken. It was something colder, like glass that had already cracked, but hadn't yet shattered. "I saw the emails. I saw the watch you gave her." The sentence floated through the speakers like a verdict. I said nothing, because I already knew how the story ends. No gas this time, just stillness, heavy, paralyzing. Jasmine stood still, eyes down, letting the weight of Melania's words work on the room like acid through concrete. One sentence at a time, it burned through every excuse, every press statement, every illusion of control. This wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was detachment. The kind that only comes after betrayal has calcified into clarity. The audio crackled off. Trump didn't move, but the mask had slipped just enough to show the man beneath the title. No defense, no denial, just a long, invisible collapse. And Melania. She didn't have to testify in person. Her silence had already done the job. Her voice, cold, composed, undeniable, had just testified for her. Jasmine didn't flinch. She stepped forward, slow and deliberate, like every inch of ground she claimed was meant to be reclaimed. Her tone didn't rise, but her words hit harder now, because they followed the sound of Melania's truth. This wasn't a marriage, she said, her voice steady. It was a brand. And she was the logo. She paused, letting that line hang in the air like a fire alarm no one could shut off. "She wasn't standing beside you because of love," Jasmine continued. "She stood there because you needed her to sell an image. The quiet wife, the graceful figure, the illusion that you were more than just power dressed in denial." Behind her, someone whispered, "God!" But no one turned to look. A Democratic senator quietly wiped away tears with the back of her hand, lips pressed tight. Across the aisle, a Republican stood up, face pale, eyes unreadable, and walked out without a word. The chamber didn't react. It couldn't. The weight of the truth was too thick to move through. Jasmine's eyes locked on Trump one last time. "You didn't just betray your wife. You betrayed the meaning of loyalty. You weaponized it. And for once, even Trump had no script to fall back on. No applause line, no spin, just silence. How do you forgive betrayal when it was branded as love?" The doors opened quietly, but the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Jasmine turned slightly as a woman stepped forward, poised, composed, but visibly uneasy. Eleanor Morris, former stylist to the First Lady. She had never testified before, never spoken publicly. But today her silence ended. She sat down, placed a single manila folder on the table, and adjusted the microphone. Her voice trembled only once. "2 weeks before the G20 summit," Elena began, "I was fitting Mrs. Trump for a silver blue dress. It was flawless, tailored perfect. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes filled. Elena glanced down, then repeated the words exactly as she remembered them. She whispered, 'This is the dress I wear when I lie for him.'" A chill rippled through the room. Jasmine said nothing, letting the moment land with its full weight. Elena opened the folder, sliding out a printed contract. "This," she said, "is a PR directive signed by Mrs. Trump. It required her to appear beside the president at the summit, regardless of marital status." Her exact words when she signed it, "If I don't show up, the markets fall." Gasps whispered like wind across the gallery. One aide turned away, visibly shaken. Jasmine gently took the document, raised it toward the cameras, and said only one thing. This is what loyalty looks like when it's bought by headlines. And suddenly, love didn't look like sacrifice. It looked like strategy. The document hadn't even cooled on the table when the shift happened. A House attorney seated 3 rows behind the panel leaned into his mic and cleared his throat. Madam Chair, he said carefully, based on new testimony and financial records, we believe there is sufficient cause to open a formal inquiry into potential violations of federal election law. The words were calm. The room wasn't. Specifically, the willful use of non-disclosure agreements to manipulate public perception during an active campaign cycle. Gasps swept through the chamber like a shockwave. Jasmine leaned back slightly, arms crossed, not triumphant, but resolute. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't need to. The pressure was already twisting around him like a noose of his own design. Then the phone started buzzing. Reporters lit up. A red CNN chyron broke across the screens outside the chamber. Breaking potential indictment looms for Trump over NDA cover-up. The words hit harder than any testimony. This wasn't just scandal anymore. It was legal velocity, the kind that knocks doors off hinges. Trump muttered something to his lawyer, too low to catch, too late to matter. For the first time, the headlines weren't echoing his words. They were chasing Jasmine's. The courtroom wasn't just listening now. It was aligning. And outside those doors, the American public was already rewriting what loyalty, leadership, and truth were supposed to mean. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Jasmine stood slowly, turned to face him fully, and spoke with a clarity that cracked through the air like thunder wrapped in silk. You didn't break her spirit, she said, eyes locked, voice low but unshakable. You just underestimated her silence. Trump didn't blink, didn't shift. For the first time in his career, he looked like a man without a counterpunch. The cameras zoomed in closer than ever, catching the twitch in his jaw, the tight grip of his knuckles, the hollow in his stare. His silence wasn't strategic, it was stunned. Jasmine took one final step toward the center of the chamber and laid the last document down, Melania's original statement of refusal to sign the 2020 asset declaration, dated, time-stamped, initialed. She didn't speak over it. She let the paper do the damage. Around the room, no one moved. No one whispered. No one dared break the weight of what had just been revealed. The moment was beyond political. It was personal, public, and permanent. Trump sat motionless. The seal of the United States behind him had never looked so distant. In Jasmine, she didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped back, hands at her side, and let the silence finish what the truth had started. Can silence become the loudest justice if we dare to listen? By nightfall, the internet had caught fire. The clip of Jasmine reading Melania's letter was everywhere, spliced, subtitled, slowed down, replayed in stunned silence. #Melania. New erupted across every platform, trending in 17 countries within 6 hours. On TikTok, women lip-synced her words. On X, veterans, mothers, and lawyers called it the moment Congress finally had a conscience. For once, America didn't argue, it just listened. Outside Trump Tower, the marble steps became a stage. Dozens of women stood shoulder to shoulder, some in silence, some holding cardboard signs with one phrase burned into black ink. Silence is not consent. Others read excerpts from Melania's letter into megaphones like scripture, raw, unapologetic, painfully human. Across the country, local news anchors abandoned their scripts. One in Atlanta teared up live on air. Another in Ohio whispered, "We've covered hearings for decades, but this felt like history, cracking open." Poll numbers shifted overnight. Suburban districts flipped. Former allies on Capitol Hill went quiet. Some erased old tweets. Some called lawyers. In Dallas, a mural of Jasmine appeared by morning, her hand holding an envelope, eyes unblinking, mouth closed. No slogan, no caption, just one woman standing. And behind her, a nation finally realizing the truth doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it waits until someone dares to speak the silence out loud. By sunrise, the cracks weren't just emotional, they were electoral. Several high-ranking Republicans, once loyal to Trump to the bone, held emergency meetings behind closed doors. They didn't shout, they didn't argue. They ran the numbers, and the numbers were bleeding. By noon, three state party chairs issued a joint statement calling for Trump to reassess his participation in the 2026 presidential debates for the sake of party integrity. The phrase sounded polite, but it reeked of retreat. Former allies began distancing themselves with surgical precision, scrubbing tweets, postponing fundraisers, rewriting history in real time. Meanwhile, news crews descended on Mar-a-Lago only to be met with locked gates and no comment. The man who once thrived on the microphone now vanished behind marble and silence. But the loudest statement came from someone who never said a word. Melania appeared at a women's charity summit in Geneva. No press tour, no speech, just a quiet entrance under flurries of snow and 100 flash bulbs blinking like judgment. Her black coat clung to her frame like armor. Hair pinned back, face unreadable. But it wasn't her eyes that made the room freeze, it was her left hand. Bare. No ring, no gold, no allegiance. Snow drifted as she walked in uncovered, unbothered, unowned. It was more than absence. It was declaration. And suddenly the woman once branded as invisible had become the quiet force dismantling an empire one unspoken truth at a time. The studio lights weren't as harsh as Congress, but the question hit just as hard. On CNN Prime, under a banner that read, "The letter that shook the nation," Jasmine sat across from the anchor's shoulders, straight eyes clear, no armor but her truth. "What gave you the strength to go that far?" the host asked, voice quiet but loaded. The question hovered for a moment, daring her to flinch. She didn't. Jasmine leaned in, not to perform, but to deliver something raw. "Because I know what it's like to be unheard," she said, "and I know what happens when women stay quiet too long. We vanish. We get rewritten. Or worse, we survive in silence while the world praises the man who buried us." The studio went still. Producers paused. Even the anchor didn't blink. Jasmine continued, softer now, but every syllable hit like truth, cracking bone. That envelope didn't just hold Melania's words. It held every woman who's ever been turned into a prop. Every silence that was bought, every voice that was trained to nod and smile while it burned. Outside the studio, the city kept moving. But inside that frame, millions were frozen, watching a woman who didn't just speak truth to power. She dismantled it. What would you do if your silence was the only thing keeping injustice alive? By Sunday morning, the letter was everywhere. Not as rumor, not as scandal, but as scripture. The New York Times printed it in full, unedited, unfiltered, across an entire inside spread. No commentary, no analysis. Just Melania's handwriting line for line, surrounded by white space that felt like a national moment of silence. Across small towns and city windows, one quote appeared over and over, taped to libraries, bus stops, coffee shop walls, church doors. "You bought silence with diamond cuffs." It wasn't just a sentence anymore. It was a reckoning. Teens spray-painted it on overpasses. Veterans tweeted it beside photos of folded flags. Survivors printed it on protest signs held high beside faces lined with quiet fury. It didn't matter where you stood politically, because this wasn't about parties anymore. It was about the power of what's left unsaid, and the woman who dared to say it anyway. In that moment, Melania's absence became presence. Her silence became substance, and her words, once locked in a black envelope, now echoed across the country like a verdict no judge could overturn. Not because it was legally binding, but because it was emotionally irreversible. History didn't speak it, it felt it. He didn't rage, he disappeared. Trump declined, every interview ignored, every call vanished from every screen where he once lived loud. Reporters camped outside Mar-a-Lago waiting for a flash of red tie or bravado, but the gates stayed shut. No motorcade, no statements, no Melania. A single leaked video broke the drought-grainy security footage from inside the Mar-a-Lago lobby. No crowd, no entourage. Just Trump walking alone through the marble corridor where he'd once waved to donors and smiled for cameras. His posture slumped, his shoulders heavy, one hand in his pocket, the other curled into a fist he no longer raised. A staffer leaked a quote to the press: "He's not used to losing. A woman's loyalty." And that cut deeper than polls or headlines ever could. Inside those gilded walls, a man who once fed off adoration now ate in silence. His empire wasn't collapsing in fire. It was rotting in quiet. The king still had the castle, But no queen, no crown, no cover. And the irony. The very thing he tried to bury the letter, the silence the woman was now the only thing the world could hear. He built his legacy on noise. But in the end, silence brought it down. The story didn't end with a gavel. It ended with a mirror. Across the country, living rooms stayed lit, longer dinner tables fell quiet, and televisions didn't change the channel when Jasmine Crockett stepped in front of the press. There were no theatrics, no celebrations, just a microphone, a sea of reporters, and the weight of something bigger than scandal recognition. She stood tall, composed but not untouched. The weeks had carved something deeper into her voice, a gravity that only truth can give. Justice isn't about punishing the powerful. She said her words slow, deliberate, almost gentle. It's about making the unheard feel seen. No slogans, no applause, just silence. The good kind, the kind that listens. Behind her, headlines began to shift, not just about Trump, but about women, about loyalty, about what we excuse and who we erase. The envelope, the letter, the voice no one expected to matter had broken through. In schools, teachers played her testimony in civics class. In courtrooms, attorneys referenced her name with respect. And in thousands of homes, ordinary people looked at each other and asked the same quiet question. Have you ever been silent? When you should have spoken, he didn't just betray a wife, he betrayed trust. He turned marriage into a stage and used Melania's silence as a shield for power. But when Jasmine lifted that letter, America heard what had long been buried beneath polished smiles and political spin. Because justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it begins when someone dares to name a betrayal for what it is. If one woman can make an entire nation listen to a truth it tried to bury, then ask yourself, are you still staying silent about what you know is wrong? If this story stayed with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it and tell us why it struck a chord. Sometimes one voice in the comments is all it takes to keep the truth alive. If this story struck a nerve, don't just scroll. Like, share and subscribe to Hill Insights, where silence ends and truth begins. Tap the bell, because next time the voice breaking the silence might be yours. Which part of Melania's letter hit you the hardest? Tell us in the comments, because sometimes one comment can carry the truth further than a headline ever could. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. The truth isn't over, it's just waiting to be heard.